Hello and welcome to week 17 of the Country Garden Crochet Along. And this week we're doing the arrow stitch again, but this time we're going to do it as a colourwork stitch. So all of our arrows will be made in a different colour to our background colour to make them really stand out and make those stitches pop. Okay, so we're making the colourwork arrow stitch, and our stitch count for this row is slightly different to last week's. So although we're going to be following mostly the same pattern, we just have to start and end in a slightly different way. Okay, so ignore this panel. I had to re-record this, so this will be empty. There'll be nothing here when you do this. So this one is being done on the short side above the marigold section. Now, your second corner stitch is here. You're not going to be working into that. You're working into the next one across. Okay, so the first corner stitch is here, the second one, so this is the two stitches in one stitch. You're not working into either of those, it's the next one across. Okay, so I'm going to be using a light green. Oh, there we go, lost my end there. Okay, and this is going to be your background colour. So you're going to join and chain one to secure it. And then you're going to single crochet in the next two stitches as well. Nope. Hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you chain one to secure it, and then in the same stitch you make a single crochet. Okay. Better start thinking straight, I'll be re-recording this again. Right. A single crochet in the first stitch, and then single crochet in the next two stitches as well. 1 and 2. Then chain one, skip a stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, and then single crochet in the next two stitches as well. And 2. Okay, so we're starting in a slightly different place. It's not in the corner stitch, but the rest of the pattern to begin with is the same. Okay. So you do your 3 single crochet, chain one, skip a stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, and then single crochet in the next two stitches as well. So exactly the same as last week. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this row, and I'll come back to you and show you how we are going to finish the row. You're going to finish your last set of 3 single crochet, and you're going to finish before you reach the start of last week's arrow stitch. Okay, so this is the start of last week's panel, and you're going to end in the stitch before. Okay, so although our stitch count for the row is a slightly different multiple from last week, by not working into the same first or last stitches as our other panels, we can make this pan out just fine. Okay, so now we're going to turn. Go and turn, chain one, and make a double crochet turning chain in the first stitch. So we're not going to add our second colour until the third row, and this row is the double crochet row. So you're just going to make a double crochet in every single stitch, including into the chain one space. So the start and end points are a little bit different for this week, but the pattern is exactly the same. It doesn't change until row 3, and then it only changes because we're going to be adding a second colour and using that at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this row, and I shall come back to you when it's time for row 3. Okay, so I got to the end of row 2 and I've turned. Oops. Okay, so after we turn, we chain one, and we're going to start our first single crochet in the first stitch, but I'm going to leave the last 2 loops on my hook. Okay, and then I'm going to bring in my darker green. So this is the medium green I've been using. Now I'm going to pull that through the 2 loops to finish the single crochet. Now we're not cutting off. We're going to be carrying, oops, hang on, let me just do a chain 1 and secure that while I talk. We're going to be carrying the lighter yarn as we go. Okay, so we're going to be working 2 colours at the same time, and whichever colour we're not working with is going to get carried along the back. Okay, so we're going to start with our first treble crochet, and just the same as last week, we're going to be working into the unused loops in that skip stitch in row 1. Okay, so we're going to make the treble, but leave the last 2 loops on your hook. I'm going to drop the dark green, I'm going to pick the light green back up, and I'm going to use this to pull through the last 2 loops. Okay, so all of your arrow stitches, the front post stitches, are going to be made in the dark green, and all the stitches that sit at the back are going to be made with the light green. Okay, so let me just pull this nice, and you've got to try and keep everything nice and taut. You don't want it so tight that it all pulls up together, you just want it nice and evenly just pulled along the top. You don't want any bumps anywhere. Okay, so there's the first stitch. Here is where our treble is sitting in front of, and so we're going to make a single crochet in the next stitch. You're going to work it over the top of the darker green. Single crochet, oops, chain 1, skip the next stitch, and single crochet. But don't pull through the last 2 loops. I nearly always forget this one, I always have to pull it out afterwards. Pick up the darker green and pull through the last 2 loops. So now we can start the next part of the arrow stitch. So yarn over twice and go back to that stitch you've made your arrow stitch in before. And so it's exactly the same as last week, the way we form the stitches. It's just how we're changing colours to get that effect that changes. So you don't pull through the last 2 loops, yarn over twice again, and move over to the next unused stitch, yarn over, pull through twice, yarn over, pull through twice. Leave the last 3 loops on your hook, drop your darker green, pick up your light green again, and pull through the last 3 loops. So we've now changed colour back to the light green. And as before, you're going to carry that darker green across the back. So now you're going to make a single crochet in the next stitch, working on top of that dark green, chain 1, skip the next stitch, and then you're going to start a single crochet in the next stitch, leave the last 2 loops on your hook, drop the light green, pick up the dark and pull through the last 2 loops, and just pull everything nice and tight. So this is the effect you're going to end up with. The light green at the back and your arrow stitches in the darker green. Okay, so I'll do one more. Okay, so we've switched colour, yarn over twice, go back to the same stitch that you finished your last arrow stitch in. Okay, and we start the arrow stitch, leave the last 2 loops on your hook, yarn over twice, move to the next unused stitch and make the next part of your arrow stitch until you have 3 loops left on your hook. Now drop the darker green, pick up the lighter green and pull through the last 3 loops, and then just pull everything tight. Carry the darker green as you go. So in the next stitch we make a single crochet, so through the 2 loops and over the top of the other green, chain 1, skip the next stitch, and in the following stitch we start our single crochet. Okay, just make sure that's pulled tight, drop the light green, pick up the dark green and pull through the 2 loops, and then we're ready to start our next arrow stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this row, and I shall see you when we get to the end. Okay, so I'm towards the end of the row, and now I need to make my final half arrow stitch to finish the row. I'm going to yarn over twice into the same stitch as I finished the last whole arrow stitch and make the treble. But I'm going to leave those last 2 loops on my hook, change back to the green, and then make a single crochet in that last stitch and then turn. Okay, so now we've turned, I'm going to cut off the darker green, as we won't be able to carry that, or we won't be carrying that through the next row. We'll instead be rejoining it when we get back to repeating row 3. So row 4 is a repeat of row 2. I'm just going to double crochet in every stitch across. Row 5 is a repeat of the arrow stitch. So it's exactly the same pattern as we did last week, it's just with that second colour added in. So just like last week, it's 10 rows, and you're repeating rows 2 and 3, and you'll end with a row of double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this panel, and I shall come back to you when it's complete. Okay, so I finished row 10, which is a row of double crochet, and you can see I've got 4 rows of arrow stitches. So I think that colour work just makes it look so pretty. But once you finish row 10, you can cut off and weave in all your ends, and that is week 17 complete. So I shall see you next week for week 18 and our next stitch. Bye for now.